Hello and welcome to the What's Up Doc podcast. It's been a few months, since we've recorded an episode. It's been a long time. I'm here with my co-host as always, Calissa Pollard. Hey, Calissa.
Hey, Jeff, how's it going?
Doing good. We were just talking about how we're a little nervous because it's the first one we've done in a while. We had gotten in such a rhythm, and then now it's like, it's like doing it all over again. I imagine it's like when a sports player goes back to their first game of the season or something.
Yeah, I'm a creature of habit. So if I don't have that habitual activity over and over again, for sure, I feel out of funk.
You forget about it a little bit. But luckily, we're going to have the day saved because we have an awesome guest, Randy Subramany, who has a great background in the healthcare space. We're excited to have him. And Randy, welcome to the show and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Jeff, Calissa, first and foremost, thank you for having me today. I'm glad that school is back in session and I can be the first one to resume from recess. So no, it's my pleasure. So just by way of a very simple background, so I serve as the director of supply chain for NewYork-Presbyterian Hospital, which is comprised of 11 hospitals or health organizations that are based in the New York City, Upper New York areas, for those who just want some understanding of the geography. And in my role, in essence, I'm responsible for the nuts and bolts of the supply chain for a hospital, and specifically the operations side. And Jeff and Calissa, that ranges from the logistics side of all the stuff that we order coming in to all that stuff. And that ranges also from your traditional commodity PPE products, masks, Band-Aids, gauze, to your more defined surgical robots, pacemakers, and supplies that are used in more complex procedures in patient care. And I have a team of 130 human beings that are responsible for ensuring that all of those 40,000 supplies that we may use on a given day are stocked throughout our health facility at specifically the Weill Cornell campus, which is in the heart of Manhattan and the heart of New York City. So happy to be here with both of you today to really get into all the fun activities that a supply chain team deals with a specific healthcare lens that may not always be represented.
Those are some crazy numbers. Like, I don't know, Calissa, when you hear those numbers, are they kind of eye-popping? Because not being in the industry, like when I hear that, it shocks me.
Definitely.
Right, 40,000 SKUs. I used to work at PetSmart. That's about how many SKUs we had in a 25,000 square foot building. We had 40,000 SKUs of pet products. So that's kind of how I anchor to it. And then 100+ people. I think people see the hospital and they think doctors, nurses, maybe some administration, but I don't think anyone could get their head around all the things needed from a logistics and infrastructure perspective to keep a large hospital running effectively.
Yeah, no, Jeff, and you're right on with that. And really, if we take just a brief step back to a few years ago with the COVID-19 pandemic, I think supply chain, rightfully so, became these two words that every human being that read any newspaper, listened to any podcast, became so familiar with that maybe pre-2020, many did not know what that term actually meant. I myself, going back to, and I know we'll get into maybe my journey into this world of supply chain in 2012, these were two: supply chain management, three words that I had no idea at all what they meant. But no, yeah, it's things that, in the commercial side or in the retail side, you think, you visit your store, you buy your products, you think that most stores try to keep things very, very simple and keep their SKU count low and their variation low. Healthcare, not so much. We've become, and we're caring for human beings, so I totally understand that. But we'll get into some themes of customization of care and other things that are just becoming more relevant in 2023. But but you're certainly right. People, the role of supply chain is truly behind the scenes. It's a thankless role per se, or function, where if everything is going right, you hear nothing. The minute that one instrument or one piece of technology goes awry during a case, or a piece of equipment is not there for caring for a patient's wound, for example, all sirens go off in the hospital. And again, I want to stress to everyone who's listening, from the supply chain end in a hospital, everyone think, oh yeah, Band-Aids, gauze, gowns, and all things that are vital. But just earlier today, we had a patient who had a severe wound that came into our hospital and needed a specific wound care vacuum, or a wound vac as we call it. That's something my team is responsible for, and all the disposables that pair with that. So you think about your ailments, there's just so many of them, and the supplies that it takes to care for that, and the logistics on the back end. It's not as though, we as humans kind of, or just as consumers, I can walk into my Wegmans or my Whole Foods or whatever and get my groceries. You have 3 pockets. Healthcare has become so specific by category and by service line, where I'm not even touching on the pharmaceutical side. I'm just touching on the disposable supplies you care for people. You can have 30 vendors in one space that you procure things from that are ultra specialized, and their main priority is producing goods and creating goods. You have to figure out the back end of how do I move that stuff from some warehouse in some far off location to the heart of New York City, where things are really complicated. So I know I've rattled off a lot there. Happy to dive in. I mean, I can go on and on. You both know that in some of our earlier conversations, but maybe I'll stop there and hear your feedback, and we can progress accordingly.
No, it's crazy because the customization is huge too. And you think about just the different level of impact with healthcare, right? If a retailer doesn't have your exact SKU, there's probably a comparable. You're like, I don't have green onions, but I could do this at your grocery store. It's like I could do white onions, things like that. People are willing to swap at alternatives. Whereas healthcare, that can jeopardize, right, the health of a patient. If you need a customized specific tool, there's a reason for it, and it's a very impactful reason. And so there's just different stakes that you guys deal with in the hospital space that I think is fascinating to me. But I hadn't considered it before, but you talk about not just the machine, this very specialized machine, but you've seen anyone in a doctor's office, they'll hook up the machine, but then there's a host of attachments to it, essentially, like those consumables, those one-time use over the top that you need to add to it. And so now just to execute this product, it might consume 20 consumable SKUs plus the core product working. And you just realize, how do you keep all that together? And like, you have to make sure that you have all those accessible. And to your point, that tool you referenced, maybe that only gets used once every 3 months. And so at a retailer, it's like, oh, it doesn't get used enough. You can just move that out. And it's like, no, this gets used once every 3 months, and it saves someone's limb or appendage. So we keep it on site because it's critical to human health. And so it's just a different world. Calissa, I know we've worked with a few customers in our Opendock world that, dance around in the medical space, but, what's your thoughts and experience and some of the things we've heard from our medical partners in the logistics space?
Yeah, and we worked with a very large, COVID vaccine appointment scheduling tool. And a big thing was, they didn't want to also waste like the vials of vaccines, because as soon as you open it, it had a certain life to live, right? And so they were really worried about actually getting the entire product utilized within that before the expiration date. And so I could see all of that just kind of being in play as well. But you were saying that it's not necessarily pharmaceuticals that you're working with. It's mostly just like the gauze and all of the products and things like that.
Yeah, it's a range of, you hit on gauze, wound care supplies, catheters, pacemakers, ICDs. The list just kind of goes on and on and on. And I think Jeff, you hit on something that's, and you both hit on something that's very relevant. And it's when it comes to healthcare and just caring for people, the idea of minimizing, which is, the theme of sustainability and circular economy is very prominent in the world of supply chain, but minimizing waste. And in a hospital setting, that takes on a very specific tone, simply, Jeff, because you may, a case in point, just something that happened yesterday. We have a pediatric patient who needs a very specific type of dialysis care. And based on this human's size and structure, they need a very specific size catheter. And Jeff, you hit on something very, very, very relevant to us, where it's that we may have common things that are used where it may be like a size 30 centimeter length, and then the length of a catheter that's used for most pediatric patients. This patient presented with something very different, and he needed a size 31 centimeter. So it gets very specific. And if that patient does not get that size, there is a significant risk that their care will be compromised. So the stakes are much higher, but it makes it all the more gratifying when we as supply chain leaders, kind of in the shadows, but coming out of the shadows as the industry becomes more recognized, as our value is truly defined and becomes apparent, as we just ensure that people are well cared for. So, in this world, we still have our ABC analysis, and healthcare lags. Don't get me wrong when it comes to advancing with all of the trends that you see popping up, whether it's AI or big data or reshoring. All that is still relevant, but there's just this added lens because it's life and death, and I think that's something worth noting that really drives what we do on the healthcare side as supply chain professionals.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think I've talked about this before, but when it's going well, no one knows you exist, right? People only know when there's a problem. I call it like the NFL referee or the NBA referee, right? A great referee, you never know their name because the game is just flowing like it should.
Yep.
It's when they make a bad call or do something egregious, you're like, oh my gosh, I know that person. And, that's kind of the thankless job, but everyone understands it. And at the end of the day, it's just, they're really glad they have all of these things, but it doesn't come to mind. And so I imagine your staff walking by and someone's like, we need that 31 centimeter catheter. And one of your staff hears it. They're like, got it. Yes. Like I knew we had to stock that because I knew someone would need it. And that's why we do these things.
Yeah, no, and you're exactly right. I think from a more global picture that the team members we have working with us on the supply chain side, they've become masters of the shipping side or the distribution side, or how we use an ERP system to reorder things, and the complexities with EDI transactions. All of those become our bread and butter. But to your point, the added layer, the icing on the, if I an analogy, like all that stuff is like the actual cake, and then the icing is when you hear that, or when you see. The beauty of what we do is we can see sometimes the value that we bring because we know that the patient is being cared for in a location that we visit. And we have the opportunity to interact with that person's care team to learn more about them. But at the end of the day, we're professionals, and our main goal is to figure out, like you said, like you both have hit on, the logistics in a very globalized world where we have suppliers and distributors who operate in the United States, but we have a vendor who weaves cardiovascular grafts in Scotland. And getting into some themes of like labor challenges and so forth, we have to manage how does something get from, FedEx and UPS are great, but there's some of these products require more specialized shipments and more specialized handling, and more specialized lead times and more specialized customs and regulations that all cater into how we care for people. And when those laborers go on strike for the right reasons, that just disrupts what we do. And we have to adapt and be flexible. Again, all themes of transparency, flexibility, adaptability. I'm hitting on all the buzzwords because they're all so true. And it really all comes to head when you have to manage so many different items for a hospital that we're considered in healthcare like a quaternary care facility, which at a very basic level simply means we care for the sickest people in the world. That's the way in which we rank. We have patients who have certain traumas. We have patients who come to us for different types of cardiac care, all different sorts of organ transplants. Recently, we had two conjoined twins that were separated in a state-of-the-art procedure. So, all of which, and our team was very thankful that the parents shouted out the supply chain team for ensuring the equipment and all of those disposables. And for some pieces of equipment, we all think of. As consumers, we think of, you buy I'm making this up, like an air purifier, you plug it in and you have power, and you maybe have a filter, one or two. For these devices, you have something that will monitor temperature, you have something that will connect to the power, you have something that will connect to the monitor to measure oxygen, CO2, all sorts of different things that connect to the complexity of the human body. And the supply chain is equally complicated. So I love it. The team loves it. Because every day is just a challenge, and the way in which we've had to adapt in the last 3 years, I think we're only at a fraction of that. I think you can incorporate AI, you can incorporate different technologies. Again, healthcare lags years behind the other markets. At the end of the day, I think we're still in this phase in hospital and maybe healthcare supply chain, besides the big pharma organizations. Like I think Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and names like that do supply chain very, very well for a variety of different reasons. But we still need that human touch in the supply chain side. So,
yeah, and I love hearing some of those names because they're in the Opendock world, so we get to learn a little bit about them. But you kind of talk about the technology in healthcare and lagging behind. And I think a lot of people right away jump to, oh, healthcare is lagging behind as a negative thing, which, you want to be on the cutting edge, but there's also some level of reliability, stability that I think in a lot of ways healthcare maybe can't be on the cutting edge, because you need to see this proven out reliably in other industries that are less risky, right? There's something to that. It's a balance of, you want the latest and greatest healthcare tech to treat people, but you might use a 30-year-old ERP system because it works, and you might be missing out on some features, but reliability is the number one feature. Availability is the best ability, right? And so I'd be curious what your take on that is from like tech and healthcare, maybe something in the software space, just how you think about it and the lag and what that means.
Yeah, no, Jeff, right on, as I will continue to say. So, we think of kind of inflection points is the term I'll use. And healthcare lags, but that doesn't mean we're not growing in the right direction. I think if we had the trend, we're trending positively. And I'll use the lens of hospitals more because that's what I really, really know well. And you hit on one layer, change management is very, very difficult. I will say, though, that many of, as the supply chain market, and in general, just the market in technology and software kind of consolidates, like realistically, on, like, to use your example of an ERP, there's a small handful of players that kind of exist in this world, whether it's the Oracles, whether it's the SAPs, whether it's the Infors, 5 to 7 major names that are, for example, like moving to the cloud and changing the way they're operating, and they're requiring their customers to do so. So I think it's becoming this blend of, you have leaders who have been in the industry for 30 years who are so used to, an on-premises, to use the ERP example, solution, that they can rest assured that my data is at this data warehouse, it's readily accessible. But now we're seeing the market is just moving in a direction, and it's kind of the logic of, you either move with it and adapt from a supply chain standpoint and also from a leadership perspective, or you'll flounder, and in a way your organization will become less and less relevant. And it's shocking to mention something like that in a healthcare setting, because we think of hospitals as which is rightfully true, kind of a safe haven for people where you come for care. And I don't want to minimize that comment, but I think we're noticing that whether it's the academic medical centers or whether it's hospitals that are keeping pace with the technological advances, whether it's software and supply chain related or care related, those are the ones who are thriving. And candidly, that's where a lot of people will flock to for their care. So the volumes of those facilities will just grow, and the supply chain needs will just continue to grow as well, because you'll have a more demanding consumer who will require state-of-the-art technology. And it becomes this proverbial supply, I'll call it a supply chain race. That's really what it is, for whether it's NewYork-Presbyterian or the Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic, to have the state-of-the-art robotics technology for spine care, or for minimally invasive surgeries, or for cancer care, areas like that really hit home. But then you'll have some of your safety net hospitals that are in areas that have individuals who are from less privileged backgrounds that may not have that access. And what we're seeing is that people are willing to travel to NewYork-Presbyterian to receive that care because of the state-of-the-art technology, but because our supply chain is adapting to what technology providers are requiring. So, Jeff, bring it back full circle. I think the change management element is extremely important. But I also think the ability of the supply chain to adapt to where the market is going is becoming extremely important.
Yeah, I can see that. And we learned a little bit about this. Calissa really led a project about building, scheduling solutions around COVID related things. And Calissa, what was some of your experience where I feel like we thought we had the technology to do some different things, and it was more like, oh, let's tone it back. We have some regulatory requirements. We have some specific things, some government mandated, and Calissa really had to juggle some of those. Do you remember like what some of those experiences were where you kind of felt like, oh, are we being held back or getting pulled into stuff that doesn't seem that critical, but it was just, hey, this is government issued, this was FDA needed, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think it was around security mostly and the data that we're trying to collect on the specific patients who wanted to sign up for appointment vaccines or COVID vaccines. So that was kind of the biggest struggle that we would have is, well, the client's asking for this specific information, but maybe we weren't actually able to gather that information from the user at the time that they're scheduling the appointment. But yeah, there's definitely regulatory issues.
And you realize there's good reasons for it, right? No one's thinks, oh, this is a bad thing. But when you go to practically build solutions and new functionality to help them, you're slowed by it and hampered by it. And again, not without good reason, but it's maybe why innovation can't keep up at the same pace, because you have to make sure you're doing all these other things that we've made as laws that are good things for us, but it's just the pace is a different level, right? And we feel that, right? When we make a doc scheduling product, we're like, hey, we think it's really important, but if it goes out, we'll figure it out. Whereas, if you're making an airplane or a space shuttle, like QA is different, right? There's a different reliability need. There's a different scale. And I think hospitals fall in that same bucket where, hey, sometimes you want this to be like the greatest B2C software you use, like your Gmail and things like that. But ultimately, those just aren't as critical of systems. So they get to, be a little more forward thinking, try things, experiment. They don't have to be as rigid in this reliability sense.
Yeah, and you both hit on some key elements of what healthcare has that a lot of other markets or just sectors don't. And the most obvious one is definitely the regulatory element of governments and prominent health organizations that influence and drive the rules and regulations, Jeff, to use your words, for all the right reasons, because we're dealing with human lives here, that regulate what we can and cannot do. I think healthcare is also unique because of the breadth of stakeholders involved. Like we think of the hospital itself and we think of all the people that staff that work in a hospital. But then to your point, government agencies, you have lobbying organizations, you have the insurer side, which is a significant side because just the way in which the healthcare system operates in the United States is to make a long story short, hospitals are either paid via government funding, via government insurance agents, Medicare and Medicaid, or commercial insurers. And those organizations have significant say, even down to the supply chain lens of what we can and can't do. Think of it in this way, like you come in for procedure A. An insurer has defined that, hey, for this type of procedure A, here's what we think your costs need to be, or what will reimburse you for based off of that because of your labor expense, because of your supply expense. And if you say, hey, I'm bringing in the latest and greatest technology for X number of dollars, and an insurance organization or some sort of regulatory body says that's unnecessary, you're not in a way being compensated for that. And that hits your bottom line or your margin. And most hospitals, even the for-profit ones, which are limited in scope, operate at a single-digit margin, and it's not like the big tech organizations that have some sort of pool that they can use to invest or risk or absorb some risk by just trying something different. On the healthcare side, again, we have regulators, insurance markets, and then we have important data that people really value, PHI, patient health, protected health information, that there are a lot of, rightfully so, fines and regulations around. And part of that information is, many don't realize that, is the products that were used for your care. So that all kind of fits within to the importance of the supply chain team and leaders having to adapt in the face of change management, regulations, trimming margins that are just becoming more and more apparent. So, I do think in the end that technology will be an enabler to get us there. I think the saying is, AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will overtake humans without AI. So I think that's where hospitals will need to lean as we just continue upward in this positive trend direction, with consideration to regulatory organizations, with consideration to how we prioritize investments. And also the talent, the last thing I'll hit on too is just the talent market in supply chain. From what I've read, is in a very unique spot. Put aside manufacturing demands not meeting the supply of manufacturing workers. In healthcare settings, we're in this very unique spot where most leaders are less than 5 years, from what I've heard in some industry studies, less than 5 years away from retirement or 5 to 10 years into their leadership career. So, if you do some math, just making some assumptions of basic retirement age of 65 as an example, you have leaders who are likely in their late 50s to early 60s. And then you have leaders who, let's assume you graduate from graduate school in 25 to 26, who are somewhere from the 25 to 40 range. So you're in this unique talent market where you either have seasoned veterans who are so used to what they're doing, rightfully so, because it's been, Jeff, to your point, it's reliable, it's available. If it's not broken, why fix it? Versus leaders who only really know, I need to adapt to this change because that's what the market is telling me I need to adapt to. And how do we figure that out? And those two types of leaders have to find ways to coexist, especially in the supply chain market where there is a talent gap. But time will tell, and I'm hopeful that healthcare will just continue on, specifically hospitals, of this trend, especially within the supply chain space of attracting talented leaders who want to solve for not only the issue of caring for people, which is very complex, but the challenge of we buy all this stuff, 40,000 things, probably from 40 to 50 countries around the world. How do we get it to one pocket of 3 city blocks in New York City?
You mentioned the age gap and the difference of maturity of people in these roles. And I think it's so interesting because, I've seen ERP implementations and I think of this from a psychological perspective. They're brutal. Yep. I would only want to do one per lifetime. Right. And so I think if I was 60 and I put one of these in 20 years ago, I'd be like, I'm just going to ride this until the end. But so then as I retire, there's a new crop who has a new, we'll call it ERP or substantial system, who's like, I've got my one in me. And it's now because truly ERP could be like, I've seen it anywhere from like 2 to 7 years. Yep. And I think people are like, there's no way an ERP took 7 years. Like I watched it like to fully get out. And so I think everyone's only got one of those in their lifetime. And so this changing of the guard, I actually think is where you see like the next big jump of, hey, we haven't updated a system since maybe the mid 90s. We're finally ready to do it because someone has the bandwidth, they're ready. And if you were changing these systems out every year, 5 years, even to keep up, you'd never ROI on them because they're so big, so cumbersome. And so you really do need to get some lifetime value out of it, right? I think of it in a lot of other equipment, right? You can think of it personally. I have a dishwasher at the house. It's fine. It's 20 years old. I'm like, I'd like the new one, but you know what? I should probably get the most out of this one. And then when it's time, I will try to go to the most sophisticated.
No, it's so true. And I think, Jeff, you and Cliss are bringing this to a nice point where, in my role right now, it's very, for a hospital setting, it's very operations focused to get supplies to care for people. I think if we just pull back from that, operations bucket, there's the broader lens of how a supply chain organization operates with the sourcing side of things. So I think where supply chain itself or supply chain management is critically important is what you both are hitting on, is making those decisions up front. You need a robust ROI, financially driven, data-centric. I'm hitting again on all the keywords of a strategic sourcing department, which is a layer within the supply chain that makes those decisions, that goes to market to understand what are the key functions or the key differentiating factors. Jeff, to use your point to ERPs, recently just wrote an article about the importance of transparency in ERPs and the decision making process. And you're right. Even whether it's SAP, Oracle, Infor, even some of your smaller ones, the migration and the change management and the consensus can take years. I think 2 to 7 is right on. Some organizations have spent 10 years trying to convert. And at that point, you've lost, it's diminishing returns. You've kind of lost your investment and you probably have lost some sort of differentiating factor that separated you before from your peers in the market. But I think it brings it full circle where you need your strategic sourcing arm of your supply chain organization to make those decisions, to make those informed decisions that have the right stakeholders at the table, understand the market, understand the dynamics, can project out as hard as it may be 5 to 7 years from now, when we go live in 7 years, is the juice worth the squeeze or something like that? So, within although my work may be, some of my background, I spent years, 3 to 4 years on the sourcing side doing some contract work before transitioning to the ops side. And you do realize how instrumental those functions are to keeping an organization afloat. So again, it fits into my plug of how instrumental a supply chain team is for any organization, because it's a team that kind of sees everything. You source the software, you can help source labor, you can help whether it's producing goods or selling goods or ensuring within my lens that our customer per se, which can be clinicians, which can be patients, have what's needed to receive care or to deliver care. So I think it all comes back to this beautiful lens of a talent-driven, change-oriented supply chain leadership team and structure and design is becoming more and more relevant in this day and age. Whether you're a Petco, whether you're a hospital, whether you're a retailer like CVS or Walmart, it's becoming a differentiating factor. And it's something that's not thought about, like using your supply chain to differentiate. But I think my prediction is in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll notice that the organizations on the health side and on the non-health side that are either ranked the highest or most profitable, or from a health perspective, maybe have the best outcomes. I think the U.S. News and World Report recently, they recently would rank, the top 25 hospitals, like how they would rank colleges. And now they've shifted to this model of, just the top 24. All 24 of those hospitals have robust, and I'll define robust as robust purchasing organizations from the buying side, the purchase order generation side, the EDI side, have robust strategic sourcing side, and have a robust supply chain ops side. Those three pillars, all 24 have that. And I think I will be skeptical to see a hospital on that list that doesn't have that, because supply chain is becoming a differentiating factor.
Well, that makes sense. And, I appreciate you talking about some of the business elements. It's hard. People don't want to think of the healthcare as a business space, but there's a blend. And I think, you mentioned the single digit margins. For me, I want my hospitals to be able to generate some profit, right? There's probably tolerances for everyone. It'd be tough if I saw that hospitals were like running 80% margin like a SaaS business. I'd say, well, I'd love to get that cost down to the patients. But when you hear that, I don't think of margin as a bad thing, because that margin, that excess margin, allows you to do a couple things. It allows you to get the most talented people. And frankly, where I want my most talented people are probably in the people caring for my lives. And that could be everything from administration to doctors and nurses. Like, I want them comped so we attract high talent for those roles. But also that hospital needs to be able to self-sustain, because if they're not getting funds from a government, they're not being funded in some kind of way, it needs to be profitable. And when you have excess profits, you can also invest more back into the business to open more hospitals or do other things. So I just love that you're willing to talk about that. I don't think people think about hospital as a business enough, because you don't want to say it's a business to take care of people, because individual patient care isn't the business. But overall, this thing needs to be self-sustaining so we can keep getting high quality healthcare. And, there's a lot of ways to accomplish that. Technology, supply chain, those are, major cost areas, but also major efficiency gains. And if you do them right, you have more money to the bottom line. And I always think of Moneyball, keep the money on the field, right? You don't want to build these big stadiums. You want the money to go to the players. And that's how I think of hospitals. I want to keep the money on the field, run an efficient supply chain so we have more dollars to pay nurses and doctors, right? Like, yeah, that's how I think about it. And so I like that you're touching on the business components and how supply chain plays a role, because I don't think they get talked about enough.
Yeah, and Jeff, you're certainly right about that. For a hospital setting, we're mission driven. At least NewYork-Presbyterian it's a nonprofit organization, so we don't have shareholders. All of our profit is in a way reverted back to our operations and to funding, as you hit on, talent, to funding new equipment, to funding the construction of new buildings. Relatedly, I think having a healthy income statement and balance sheet is important to banks if we wanted to go out to obtain a loan to help build new centers in different parts of the city. I think that helps to show how viable we are as an organization as well. So I think it's extremely important that mission is critical, And our main goal is we put patients first. That is the core of our mission statement. To successfully do that, we absolutely need to have a margin. And I think you're right. Yes, there are definitely layers of healthy and unhealthy margins for hospitals to have, but it filters back into our major bottom line expenses, which are people and then things. The things being physical goods, software, technology, and things that fall into that type of more intangible bucket. But I do think it's important that leaders in this era, especially in healthcare, have to, and maybe the non-pharma side, because again, in pharma for their own reasons may have the R&D process is so expensive, and I'm not trying to get into that, but I think it's the same concept of investing back and trying to developing therapies or technologies that help people to live longer or live healthier lives. And what I will say is to get it, maybe to bring it to the supply chain lens, having supply chain teams that make those right decisions, that minimize waste, that understand the circularness of the supply chain, all just feeds back into the bottom. All this feeds back into the bottom line. I think if we can find ways to ensure our doctors, nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists, respiratory therapists are caring for patients with the best things at the most affordable price or at the right time, all those R words, it ensures that our patients are healthier. Ensures, though, that our reputation remains pristine. And I think that's also ties back into the mission. People, especially for your health, you want to go to somewhere that is, just as a human being, that you've heard great things about, it's rated, whether you're going on a Health Grades or a Google, that has a 4.5 or has towards a 5-star rating out of 5. And I think, and most leaders won't say this. My hypothesis is that as time goes on, organizations, especially in the health side, that have robust supply chains will help to not only improve the mission of what that organization is doing, but the margin as well, which continues the cycle of ensuring the mission is accomplished. So that's the way I think about it. The business element is important from a dollars and cents, simply because it gets the right people. It helps to get us the right stuff to care for people. And, the reality is, from a hospital side, we wish we could say that we cared for everyone and we never see them again. I think the world is complicated. I think the human body is complicated. That is just not the reality of the world we live in anymore. But the beauty of the world we live in is that, hey, you need a knee replacement. You can walk in at 9:00 and leave a hospital at 4 p.m. that same day. And I think it's simply because where healthcare, not only is technology and medical devices advancing, but our supply chain and identifying who the right partners are to care for our patients is advancing. And I think that is helping to just improve our margin while also just improving our mission to get people out the door, to bring people in, care for them, and then get them out the door at the right time.
That's awesome. I want to ask a couple of the dumb questions that are entertaining for me, but Calissa, do you have any thoughts, or you could think about this, any questions for Randy as I ask my one or two dumb questions, which for me really is, I love sometimes the fun facts of usage or something like that. Like at PetSmart, we might have said we sold 1 million guinea pigs, something to give scale, or did you know we use over, 85 truckloads of fish food every week? Do you have one of those crazy numbers that you could share, thinking about that? Our hospital goes through 750 pounds of cotton balls every month. Do you guys have a fun fact that you share like that? Because I eat those things up.
I think there are so many, but if I had, I think the best way I can phrase it is, when it comes to, let's just take everyone's favorite medical supply right now, your traditional ear loop mask. I think in a given month, so let's just do some math here. Your pallet holds 40 cases of mask. Each case of mask has 2,000 cases. So that's 80,000 masks. So we go through on average, I would say, oh boy, 300,000 to 400,000 as an enterprise per month. So give or take.
Oh my God. I don't think
give or take. That's a fun fact. There we go. Of using it as
awesome.
A few 100,000 per month in just our routine operations. So
And that makes total sense, right? But you start to get a real feel for the scale, not only of the amount of people and humans coming in and out of this facility and working out, but also just the volume of supply usage, right? Like things run out quickly. Oh, we've got this pallet. This should last us 28 days, and we need to already have one queued up. And so those things are fascinating to me. Calista, do you have any? Do you have any like questions or from your personal experience?
No, yeah, I'm super curious to I mean, I heard you talk about AI, and I just want to understand maybe where you think AI is going to impact the healthcare industry as a whole, or maybe your business in particular.
Yeah, so Calista, no, that's a great question. I think I think there's layers to it. So some solutions, some solutions that come to mind that are very tangible and kind of implemented through most organizations right now, or are being implemented. Like you have like your traditional like RPA, like that's used maybe like on the accounts payable side. That it's a bot that can read invoices and partner or pair into or integrate into your ERP system that helps that uploads invoices that then ensure your vendors are paid on time, that thereby prevent credit holds, which thereby allow for your supply chain to receive supplies in an adequate time frame. So I think the best way I can think of AI is integrating into some of your key systems, whether it's an ERP, whether it's an EHR system, whether it's even for more of our traditional like distributor side, like Cardinal Health, Medline, they have like WMSs, warehouse management systems, that have a lot of AI that conduct a lot of the forecasting analysis for hospitals. And hospitals are not, I want to be respectful in saying this, do not have massively sized analytics departments from the supply chain side that can help to conduct this. I think we have very rudimentary Excel, Access-based, maybe Tableau if you're lucky. So I think partnering with a lot of external suppliers who have a lot of the AI elements embedded within their technology systems or incorporated within will truly get us to where we need on the logistics side on the logistics side. But grand scheme, eventually, I think you'll have AI into like EHRs that can help deal more with the medical billing and coding side, that can just seamlessly communicate with insurance companies. Where right now you have coders and billers that are human. So I think those jobs will be augmented to focus more on maybe the auditing or the more thorough review of complex cases to ensure that hospitals are really kind of recouping what they need for patient care. So I think you'll see a lot of AI really on the revenue side to help hospitals remain sustainable. But coupling that in a way on the procure to pay side, I think the last side on the payment side, which is all part of the supply chain per se in the grand scheme of things, you'll see AI embedded really in the ERP systems more and more to deal with some of those tedious and meticulous, check cutting transactions that are instrumental because our suppliers need to be paid so they can maintain their operation, so we can receive what we need. So I think those are the two key functions where I see AI becoming instrumental. I don't see a Chat GPT or any of that yet being embedded in it, but I do think there are organizations that are maybe slightly outside of the supply chain scope, but still relevant, that are transcribing physician notes, that are taking a lens on like a medical scribe, that are becoming important, because I think that information can then again be inserted into like an EHR and can help with documentation. I think the theme may be very generic. Well, using AI to make us more efficient, and I think you'll see it in the supply chain lens, and I think you'll see it in the care lens when it comes to some of the more service or administrative tasks that a lot of our clinicians have taken on just as their roles have evolved, that kind of have removed them away from the bedside. And it's great because I think it'll get those human beings back to being more patient-centered or more at the patient bedside versus on a laptop in a chart, not interacting with the person they're caring for. So I think it's going to be a win. I think we're on the upward curve. I think we have some time before we get there. I think there's some more investment. And I'm hopeful that as time elapses, the cost for a lot of these technologies, I mean, cloud computing as an example has become so much more affordable now than 10 years ago. I'm hopeful that a lot of these startups, as they scale their business, they are able to drive their own costs down and then that makes things a little bit more affordable for hospitals who can find ways to maintain their margin and thereby bringing it all full circle, maintain a healthy mission.
Very cool.
That's awesome. I really like the practical function of AI, right? I think too many times we get caught up of like, you'll walk in and say a couple of things and AI will diagnose you. And it's like, well, maybe we can get there. There's a lot of liability, a lot of training. There's a lot of things with that. Why don't we start with, what if the doctor didn't have to spend one of their 10 hours a day just simply writing notes? And the notes were in a very structured, clear fashion that could feed the electronic health records really nicely. What a great use of AI, because now instead of getting 10% more doctors, we've unlocked every doctor to have 10% more time, and like all the way down the list. Like that seems like a great practical starting point for AI.
Exactly right. And I think, Jeff, to Kalissa's question and to your point, even on the supply chain side, as we begin to incorporate like more RFID technologies into tagging, so like here we tag some of our more expensive medical products with an RFID sensor that then, you can kind of wayfind, figure out how much of that item you have on the shelf. And it's integrated into our ERP where, once an item is pulled and scanned to our EHR, it deducts from our inventory system. And there's this system of auto reordering. So I think as much as it applies to the clinical lens, the supply chain lens, it's still there and it's still ripe for this change as well, because then I can say, I can say that my team can now spend more time communicating with that doctor to understand the needs of the patient they're caring for that may be very specific and not as generic as someone walking in with a cold. Versus my team member will spend hours at a time counting stock on a shelf. So I do think technology, AI, and RFID may not be in the lens of AI, but I do think it's smart intelligence that will, as an example, that will get us there, or sensory technology that will get us there with the Internet of Things and all of that automation, I think will get us there. And I think it's applicable to many different divisions, but many different, departments or services or divisions of a hospital. But it's important for the clinical care side, but it's really, really also important for this back end side. Again, whether you're managing ultra expensive products used in medical procedures, whether you're managing infant formula that's used to care for babies that are just born, I think it all ties in well to, Kalissa, how, whether it's, AI or automation or just this bundle of technology, seamless technology that requires maintenance but less manual interventions, how important that is to our mission. And there is an ROI there. It takes some time to recognize that, but it is certainly there. So I think there's practical applications as well on the supply chain side.
That's awesome. Kalissa, great question. That is a perfect way to end this and kind of wrap up, like thinking about how technology and AI and other functions are going to play a role in the medical supply chain in the future. And, I think we're all excited about it. Randy, thank you so much for the time. This was awesome. We can tell you're passionate about your job, what you do. And, as someone, I don't think anyone's like, I'd love to go to the hospital. I certainly probably have a little extra fear of that and things along those lines, but I feel more confident and excited to be a part of that world when I need to, knowing people like you are there. So thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, Jeff and Kalissa, thanks for having me. Maybe 2 years down the line, when you both are huge podcast stars, you'll do me the pleasure of having me back so we can talk about how the industry has evolved from 2023 to 2025. But yeah, it's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
That sounds perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you
all.
Randy. Bye.